It does. This technology works. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm super happy to see a whole bunch of faces here because coming early to the CSM and investing in microbiology and biology education, it kind of really shows your commitment to that. So I just wanted to take a second to give you all props for coming out early and being here. So my name is Pickell. I'm a teaching professor at Carleton University in the Department of Health Sciences.
And I'm Anil. I'm the laboratory and research coordinator. I'm over with the Department of Health Sciences.
Yeah, so we, in teaching microbiology, it's an introductory course for second year students in health. We thought about how we could make it more authentic, their learning experience. So we started out with the traditional type labs, which we'll talk about, and we've transitioned over to what's known as a cure, and we'll talk about that as well. So just before we start, we do want to say that we don't have any conflicts of interest to declare. We are not being paid by Tiny Earth, we're not being sponsored, we just really believe in the program, and we'll explain why. So I usually like to start my lessons with guiding questions rather than learning outcomes, because I don't like to prescribe the learning too much. And I will often put the learning outcomes at the end of my presentations. And I really want to promote a sort of inquiry and curiosity in the students. So I usually formulate all of my presentations in forms of questions. So first of all, what is the problem with traditional labs and teaching in microbiology and biology? We're going to look at what is a cure, because we're going to keep using this acronym. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you not. And why would we might want to use them? How did we adapt Tiny Earth as a cure to use in our own curriculum? What are the impacts? So what are our students saying? And finally, we're going to have some time, hopefully, to think about how you might move your courses or labs toward a more experiential type learning. So we're going to start with a little group activity here. Let's meet Holly. So here's Holly. She is an enthusiastic student like the ones we see in our introductory microbiology labs, for example, or courses. And she's really excited about this first micro course and about learning the lab techniques. So each week she's expected to follow a different step-by-step protocol for a new technique. And from that, there's results that she's expected to get. We know what the outcome is going to be. And then she has to write a lab report. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. Okay, so the term goes on, and what happens is Holly, her experiments don't go quite as expected. They don't seem to work, and she struggles to figure out what's going wrong when she has to write her lab reports. But it doesn't matter, she has to move on to the next technique, right, the next week. By the end, she's feeling really discouraged, and she's convinced that she's not good at science and wonders if she should even continue in the field. So we're going to do a think, write, pair, share. You're probably familiar with the think, pair, share used in large classrooms. In particular, it's effective, but I like to add the W to write because it helps us think about our thoughts and get them formulated before we share out, and then we feel more comfortable sharing with somebody else. So we're going to take 5 minutes. You're going to just start first, like a minute or two on your own, no talking. And you're going to think about these questions and the scenario. So what's going on in this scenario? What is Holly experiencing? And do you identify any problems within this scenario? Okay, so take 1-2 minutes just to think on your own. You can write down your thoughts. Those online can write down their thoughts as well.
There's just Ryan in addition.
All right, I'm sorry.
You can use the whole chat box.
Take a second to think, write down your thoughts. Okay, so what we're going to do now, you've had some time to think about it, we're going to get into groups of 3 or 4. It's hard to talk across an aisle, so I suggest you turn and do or like turn around to the people behind you just before you start. So we always say don't move yet, right? Because once the students start moving, forget about it, you've lost. So you're going to just introduce yourselves first. So we were going to do an icebreaker, but we're like, oh crap, we don't have time to do everything we want to do. So we're combining them together. So just introduce yourself, where you're from, and then share your thoughts about what Holly's experiencing. So I'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes for that. Go ahead.
I'm Michael. I'm from the University from Pickell University.
And I'm Mark as well. What do you all think is Holly an experience?
The University of Saskatchewan is
We started like we nearly do. It's just very nice, but you know, you guys know
Yeah, I feel like this is something that most people going through learning microbiology or biostatistics.
I'm a PhD student.
can't give up.
Yeah, I think it's kind of part of it, but it might be a problem. The part
Now like she's having trouble like
this stuff.
figuring out the major background.
Trying to learn something, you're expected to be good at it. We're not making but it seems that that's the format we sent on to us that it's not caveated in those. It's okay if you have that. If you're learning the same thing, you're not gonna work.
Hi, yeah. They work in pairs.
I think it's more than especially for it's introductory, right? So probably gets close results. Yeah, it's
Yeah, again, science will be better, you know.
Semester it was like a lot of mistakes, so yeah.
Like, gonna get the bell or something. So we'll bring the extension back. I know we could talk about this a long time, but we want to keep things moving. So let's turn it back around. Okay, so who would like to share just a quick summary of what your group thought? Is there anyone who's comfortable speaking? Yes.
So my name is Carleton from University of Waterloo. We were just kind of talking about how she might be feeling stress and anxiety, and we always recommend that the change of the mindset to see that instead of being failure is bad, to see it as part of science, and understanding that if she's not understanding what she's doing wrong or where she might be struggling, we strongly recommend go into the material before lab, read it up much more clearly if she has questions. The reason we have TAs is for that reason.
Yes, true.
Is that you don't give up just because things went wrong.
Okay, other groups had some different thoughts. Yeah.
Well, we highlighted that it's part of science, that sometimes even as a like PhD, postdoc, sometimes your like basic experiment doesn't work and you kind of have to find a way to understand why. And also if she feels discouraged and that she's convinced she's not good, there's also part of the supervision, which is important, like the TA, the professor has to kind of, if possible, be able to detect this and help the
Okay.
student to understand and to maybe kind of change the mood, not change the mood of the student, but kind of
Yeah.
troubleshoot the student.
So it sounds like she doesn't think it's normal to fail.
Yeah.
Okay, other thoughts? Yeah.
We thought that also, it sounds like, just sort of based on the context of the scenario, that her success in the class and her grade might be coupled to getting the right answer. And that there wasn't an opportunity to try again.
Yeah.
And so she might feel a bit right to be discouraged in this case because it sounds like in this scenario, she's not that scientific curiosity isn't being fostered.
Okay, other thoughts? I heard some, yes, go ahead.
I think curiousness, she's following a very specific step-by-step protocol for learning a technique, which can be good and also bad because first of all, it's very detailed, you get all the instructions, but also then you don't really ask questions. I think there's lack of like your self-promoted kind of knowledge.
Yeah, well, and I heard over here in the back something about choice. She's just following something and is not getting much say in what she's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just contextually, like we're getting her perspective, but we don't really understand what's been presented to the students. Like, is the purpose of the lab report to get the right answer or to explore the results? Or like, what have they been told in terms of like, this could go wrong? And we want you to understand why it could or couldn't go wrong, like depending on how it's framed to them, it should be more helpful.
But when you have students around who are getting it right.
Yeah.
That's when, the person who's not getting it will be best. Yeah.
We'll do one more. Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty much we've discussed some of the points that has been raised, but I just noticed that she's an undergrad and prior experience too is very important. The technique during the experimentism. So even following the procedures doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna get it right.
Yes,
The
yes.
technique is important as well.
And here's another question for you, though. You're right, we need still to understand these basic lab techniques. But if you're following a procedure, does it mean you understand what you're doing?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay, excellent. Thanks for that feedback. So the question is then, what skills are we teaching our students when we are doing these traditional labs, or lecture falls into this category as well, and it's the whole other topic. But what are the qualities that we would want Holly to develop to succeed in science? So we've already touched on some of those. Understanding failure, so maybe building some sort of resilience, right? Some choice and agency in what she's doing. More inquiry and curiosity being built into that. We can think of others too, and we're going to come across them. So just kind of keep this in mind as we move forward. So as we've just established, do traditional recipe labs develop these skills of success in science in our students? And I would argue that they do not, because as we just established, right, students can perform without learning. Right, and I'll say that again, because I think it's really important and it applies to lecture as well, or any type of learning, right? Students can perform without learning, like memorizing content and regurgitating on a test. They can perform without learning. So Holly's not alone, and it turns out there's a lot of, US is really good at collecting data on this type of stuff, like graduation rates and retention in STEM majors. And so while this does come out of the States, I feel like it's likely representative of what we see here in Canada. But there was a study done back in 2019. They followed some folks who started in STEM majors through time about whether or not they graduated. And what we notice is those who persist and graduated with their STEM major when they started, there's a really high attrition rate just in general. Right, there are only 50 some odd percent in the various categories or lower that actually complete their STEM major. And those who switch out of science and those who leave college altogether, what do we notice here? We can't see the legend. Is there. So the blue line represents white students. The next one are Latinx students, and then the ones with the diamonds in it would be Black students. Okay, so what do we see in the States? Essentially, that we can see the attrition rate is much higher for those underrepresented populations. And that's very clearly established. So Holly's not alone here. So what can we do about it? And the suggestion is that authentic tasks in science or whatever discipline you're in will actually help address this attrition rate. So what are authentic tasks in science? Conducting research, communicating, things like writing policy. We can come up with a whole bunch of others, but we're going to focus on conducting actual original research. And so if students do in their undergrad, if they participate in an undergraduate research experience, like real authentic, not just doing cookie cutter labs, again, coming out of the States just recently, it's very clear that students, so this gray bars are like a control group, and the darker ones are the ones, the students who participated in undergraduate research. And what we see is after 4 years and after 6 years, the graduation rate is much higher in their STEM discipline. They actually persist and graduate if they participate in undergraduate research. The other thing we see is that participating in undergraduate research represented here and here, their graduation rate, the gap in those who graduate for those underrepresented students, like students of color. This is a proxy for students who are in low socioeconomic status, and first generation students. They were really closing that equity gap in terms of persisting and graduating. So it seems pretty clear. Shouldn't all students just participate in undergraduate research experience? But who actually does? Think about this for a sec. Students have to self-select and initiate a relationship with a professor, right? They might have responsibilities outside of school and other financial reasons they cannot do that because often it's volunteer. And our faculty have very few spots available. It doesn't happen until later in their undergrad, like 4th year. And they often select students with high academic standing, in addition to the hidden curriculum, which again is a whole other topic. Okay, so there are very few students and select students who actually get to participate in these research experiences. So this is where the CURE comes in, which stands for a course-based undergraduate research experience. Essentially, we're embedding the research experience into a course early in the undergrad such that all students get to participate. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a whole bunch out there. Has anybody heard of CURE? Let's first do a show of hands. Who has heard of a CURE? Okay. And has anybody tried doing one in their courses and run a CURE before? Okay, this is fantastic. It makes me super happy. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel because one of the greatest barriers is the development of the CURE. And so there's a whole bunch that already exists. The T phages, which we're going to see, it sounds like there's some in Drosophila and genetic research plants, and we're going to talk about tiny earth.
All right, so I just mentioned the importance of a CURE program. So I talk about the CURE that we adapted. This is what we call the Tiny Earth Project. And this is basically a global initiative. This is designed to discover new antibiotics to fight the antibiotic resistance crisis. And like I said, it's a global initiative. As of now, 33 countries are actually participating in this. So many institutes from 33 different countries. And currently 800 plus instructors worldwide are actually involved or a part of the Tiny Earth Project. And per year, there's a turnover of 16,000 students who actually participate in this CURE program. So, and so far, and this has been there for almost 15 years now, and so far, with a collective effort, 28 new bioactive compounds have been identified. So they're still, going through the clinical trials, but and all this work was done just by students. So they started the initial screening, they identified something, and then people took it from there. All right, so we are one of the 10 institutes in Canada currently doing this tiny earth program, just 10. And definitely you need training to basically start this program. We got trained at Johns Hopkins, and it's a 1-week mandatory training to become the tiny earth partner instructors. And it's a hands-on training, so you get to basically do all the experiments, and then you get to see the results. And it's also a refresher on AGI principles, the inclusive strategies. So once you have that training, you basically can start this course as a part of your curriculum. The 3 main goals of the Tiny Earth project are to basically inspire diverse students so that they can actually persist in science. And then, as we all know, antibiotic resistance is a big problem. So to find new antibiotics that can actually fight the resistance problem. And then to create awareness among people about the importance of soil. So the founder of this particular project is Jo Handelsman. She's a Presidential Award winner. And so according to her, by 2040, we'll lose most of the topsoil, and it's hard for us to actually grow crops. So these are the 3 main goals. So creating awareness, making sure that students are retained in science. So what is the Tiny Earth curriculum? Basically, this is what is done. This is the entire thing, basically. So here we start with soil, then we look for unique colonies, then we check if any of those unique bacterial colonies are able to produce antibiotics. And then you can take it all the way to extracting the antibiotic and then doing the chemistry. So all this, there are some people who run a year-long course, and they can actually go all the way to identifying the chemical structure. And the best part about this particular project is you can customize it to your needs. So for instance, you can go all the way, like I mentioned, or you can basically stop by characterizing the antibiotic producers. So that is what we are doing as a part of the intro microbiology second year course. It's a 3-month program, and students usually are in the lab for 3 hours a week. Yeah. So you can actually stop here just by identifying the antibiotic producers, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so the way that we structured the course, apart from the actual experimentation, and Anil's going to take you through how we actually broke it down week to week. But here are some important key components. The students choose a soil sample from somewhere they want. Then they choose which bacteria they would like to pursue, which antibiotic producer. They conduct experiments, and we have flex time, so they get to redo the experiments until they get it and they succeed. So there's a lot of iteration. We also have posters. This is the part that we added in. We include a poster session because that's authentic science communication. And they have a template to work from. They get feedback on their drafts, and then they finally present it and you know, the department is invited to come and watch.
Yeah.
So it's very well structured and scaffolded, and there's a lot of room for iteration, for trial and error, and for choice in there.
So we give them a lot of flexibility. I have students who repeated their PCRs at least 6 times. So we give them a chance to come anytime they want. We keep everything ready, and then they can repeat it. And the poster presentation is the critical part. We almost have 30% of the grade just for the poster presentation. So a lot of importance is given to that part as well. So I'll just show you what we are doing as a part of the Tiny Earth project, what our UG students are doing and the grad students are doing. So they collect the soil sample, and 1 gram of soil sample typically has anywhere between 2 billion to 10 billion bacteria. So you do a serial dilution and then start spreading the bacteria. So this simple spread rate. You will notice that all the techniques that are being used are traditional microbiology techniques, which are used in everyday lab. So once you have those, isolated bacteria, you just collect unique ones, and this is what we call a master plate. So you have a collection of the bacteria to work with. Now that you have a master plate, so the next step is to see which of these is actually producing an antibiotic. So you have a collection of that. So to do that, we do know that some bacteria produce antibiotics which are effective against gram positive and some against gram negative. So we want to screen for both. So The same set of bacteria is tested against a gram-positive escape-safe relative. That's Evinia keratobora, which is gram-negative. This is Bacillus subtilis. And once we find an antibiotic producer, you can see here. So the way it is done is you spread the test bacteria on the surface, create a lawn, and on top of it, you patch your isolates. So if any of those isolates actually produce a bioactive compound, then it basically inhibits the growth in its vicinity. So you see a halo just like your traditional herbivore acid. So if you see a halo around your bacteria, that is producing some sort of bioactive compound. So you can see the halo clearly here. So once you have that, you go back to your original plate, figure that, and then you do a streak plate. Then the subsequent, our students actually perform 10 different biochemical tests, and they do PCRs. We do the 16S RNA sequencing, and then finally they compile the data and present their work in the form of a poster. So all this is achieved within 3 months. So the first part is done in week 2, because week 1 we have a dedicated week for orientation as well as biosafety training. So week 2 is when we start this, and then week 3 we have the collection, which we call master, which we are calling master plate, and then by week 4 they'll know which ones of those are actually producing antibiotics. So if you want to basically customize this to 1 month, you can stop there. You have an antibiotic producer. That itself is a good research point. Then our students go all the way, and then they do biochemical characterization, bioinformatic analysis, finally presenting their work in the form of a research poster at the end of week 10. So this is our curriculum, and I know the photo is blurred, but a lot of smiley faces there. That's Laura and Annie right in the middle, and this is our poster session, the recent one. So we have a nice session at the end of the semester. And having seen how successful this program is, we take feedback from our undergrads. A lot of them have no clue as to what they want to do, once they graduate. But after 3 months, when we ask them, a lot of them want to pursue research. They want to work in some sort of lab. So that has been the feedback. So impressed by how well they are receiving this, we wanted to adapt this to the high school.
In an outreach program, yeah.
Yeah. So we have something called a mini course program for the high school students. We have it for 5 days in summer, where high school students can come and actually experience this. So the way we adapted this is because 5 days is not enough time to allow the bacteria to grow and go through this. So the way we designed this is they'll be doing all the experiments that the undergrads are doing. The only thing is, instead of waiting for the bacteria to grow, we just give them the pre-prepared plates, which were prepared again by our undergrad volunteers. So we have a lot of volunteers just for this. So they go through the plates, they do discover antibiotic producers. Instead of 10 biochemical tests, they perform 3 biochemical tests, they do gram staining, and instead of a physical poster, they present a digital poster. So essentially we adapted this. So they do that in just 5 days, the entire thing. And they get to experience, in addition to that, they do the hanging drop methods, the basic ones, which will basically show the what kind of bacteria and things of that sort. So this is the latest cohort. And a lot of we took surveys at the end. So the one thing that I wanted to highlight is a lot of them reported that they are now interested in science just after this 1 week training. That has been, in fact, that has been a unanimous thing. All right, so one of the high school students that actually took this program was Helly, sitting there. She's just in 8th grade, and she's currently working as an intern in one of the neurobiology labs. So just for an 8th grader to get an internship is a big deal. Just because of this experience, she was able to actually get that. All right, so what other opportunities is actually Tiny Earth giving us? So like I said, we take several volunteers, and I sent out a mail to all the people. We needed 3 or 4 volunteers. Believe it or not, we ended up with 16 volunteers. So everybody wanted this, and because these are the people who took the course and they came back just to help us out. And we encouraged them by giving them CCR. And we have our first summer research student. This is basically an extension of the UG one. So the undergraduate people are collecting the isolates that produce antibiotics. We store them. So the summer research product student is actually taking those isolates and testing them against the actual pathogens to see if they are effective against pathogens obtained from a hospital. And we are planning some independent studies, and a lot of our students end up with summer job just based on the time-year lab experience.
Okay, so we have a 10-minute mark.
Yep.
Which, yeah, obviously we always have a million things planned. And what we'd like to do is show you a video, but just before we do, these are some testimonials from our undergrads. The first video you'll see TBO, which is like TBO Ontario came and filmed us and made a little story. So that's the first one. But we also just invited any undergraduate students to give us videos, to send us videos of their experience, and we didn't give them any prompts, and we didn't tell them what to say. And so just pick out some of the key phrases that you're noticing as you're watching, just jot them down. And then we're going to compare notes after to see if we notice any common themes that kind of come up from these testimonials.
This is probably one of the few labs where you're doing an entire big project over the entire semester. So using my soil sample, which is what I carried on with through the entire 9 weeks. I think that was probably my favorite part about this lab. It's that it's not just a lab where you have a lab protocol, follow through, and then the next day it's something else. This was a lab where you actually had control and you could do a particular test several times if you needed to. And to know that you actually have, you're playing a role in potentially making something really helpful for the world. I think that not only puts a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of pride, because you know that you're doing this for a good cause and not just for grades.
The Tiny Earth Cure program is by far the best lab experience I've had so far throughout my entire degree. Unlike other labs where you're pretty much following a set procedure where you kind of already knew what the outcomes were supposed to be, this one, it was different for everyone. We were all following the same general procedure, but people's outcomes varied so much based on the original sample that they started with. It was very novel. It was super interesting, which made the entire lab, the entire course much more engaging, especially having ownership over the work that we were doing, the research that we were putting it out. We took pride in the work that we were doing, and it made us much more invested in doing it really well. Getting to participate in a much more realistic lab setting than I think what we usually get to in other courses was very interesting. And I think it also really opened my eyes to what research could potentially be like as a career, and the fact that that's maybe a possibility for me. The final research posters were a fantastic way to synthesize all our course content, but also getting to present our research to others really deepened my own understanding of the material. And it showed me how many ways that each project could be taken outside of what we did, especially getting to see others' work at the other research day presentations and getting to present at the University of Wisconsin showed that, okay, we were all given kind of like the same general set of instructions that we've done so many different ways, so many different directions. And I think seeing unique research done by people in similar shoes as me, most of them being like second, third year undergraduate students, actually getting to contribute something new to scientific literature was very inspiring. And it was just overall an amazing experience that I'll never forget.
Hi, my name is Sneha, and I was part of the Tiny Earth project as a microbiology course. I feel like the Tiny Earth project is so different from like a traditional lab course where you're doing different experiments every time and there's no correlation. Having an independent research-based program at Carleton really helped put all those different skills together and have that research experience, how actual research is done. So that way, Tiny Earth project was very different than what other lab projects that I've done in the past. It also benefited me in so many different ways because I've never done a poster presentation before. So having the kind of experience that people normally get in their masters or like doing a PhD, having that beforehand as an undergrad student was really helpful. Tiny Earth project was also really fun, just like knowing these different biochemical tests and all these procedures like lab techniques that normally you wouldn't find as a second year undergrad students. Having that experience, which would really be beneficial in my careers ahead, and like it really gave me that opportunity to like open up and use my imagination of how I want to present the research that we did, which I believe was really helpful in enlightening our creativity as university students. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ainsley Lewis. I'm a third-year health sciences student at Carleton University, concentrating in global health. Participating in the Tiny Earth project in my second year has been the highlight of my undergraduate career. Truly, no other laboratory course can compare. So often, as undergraduate students find ourselves seeking work in laboratories. However, very few have the opportunity to gain experience prior to finding their first job. So leaving this class with a list of applicable skills in our resumes is an unbelievable advantage. Not only did this project enrich my understanding of microbiology through hands-on training of field-relevant techniques and skills, but in knowing that our experiments were contributing to a greater cause, I felt purpose and pride in my work for the first time in the lab setting. Additionally, this project allowed me the chance of a lifetime to present my work via poster presentation at the Tiny Earth Global Conference in Madison, Wisconsin. Sharing my work with fellow students and professionals in the field helped me find confidence in my presentation skills and was incredibly enriching. Overall, from start to finish, my experience in the Tiny Earth project is something I will never forget, and I feel so lucky to have been granted this opportunity.
All right, so hopefully have you picked up some of the terms? Let's just hear a quick popcorn across the room. What are some of the things that you noticed or terms that kind of stood out to you? Thoughts, yeah?
Having control.
Control. Yeah.
I heard the word pride a couple times.
Right.
That's what you would think of.
Yeah.
Use the word opportunity a lot, which makes them sound very optimistic.
More optimistic for sure.
The confidence is,
Yeah.
confidence is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Also purpose.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Linking to pride and
Linking to pride, exactly. Yeah.
Engaging and responsibility.
Yes, okay, so I'm sorry, we're gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna keep going, but hopefully we convinced you that implementing a more experiential and authentic type of research experience to the students. We've seen some of the data. I have a lot more data that I could show you if you're interested. But I'm gonna just jump ahead here. Like, these are all the things that you said, things like connection, thinking like it's scientists, resilience, and growth. There's actual literature to support that that these things do develop due to undergraduate research experiences. So we put them all together, we get increased persistence. And I'm sorry, I'm totally hopping through quickly. If you want to talk about this after, I'm happy to. But essentially, there have been studies to show that a cure specifically can increase retention as well. So the last thing we wanted to do, because it can be really overwhelming, I always say start small. I really am terrible at this. I don't know about you all, but you just want to change everything all at once. Like I'm like scrapping the whole course and I'm starting from scratch. But if we start really, really small, one example I did once before I did the cure is just an inquiry-based lab where I gave students all the materials. I gave them like some different possibilities and I just said, Kate, you're doing the lab after we had done, you know, a good 6 weeks together already. And they had totally free reign. They produced their own hypotheses and they design their own experiments. So there's like many ways that you can do this. So in the last few minutes we have, can you just think to yourself of a course that you would like to maybe move more toward in this type of experiential learning activity? And now that you know what the hallmarks of this type of experiential learning is that we've just discussed, think about just one little piece that you might be able to incorporate. So take 2 minutes to think to yourself. So first the course or the lab or like a small little piece of content. And then we'll just take 2 minutes to share it and we'll be done. Is that okay?
Actually, I mean, you probably got about 5 to 10 more minutes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So just take 2 minutes to think to yourself what's one small little change. And if you're a TA, just think of a course you might be teaching in the future or one that you've taught in the past. Is there like one little thing you could do to give them choice or give them a bit of ownership, maybe more feedback and iteration? Just a small little tweak sometimes is all it takes. If you've thought of something or you're still not sure and you want, you know, some help, let's just turn to a partner and share what you're thinking about and see if you can kind of run your idea by that person and they can help you troubleshoot and think of something maybe you haven't thought of. So let's take 2 minutes to do that.
It's really environmental.
Any ideas? Students.
I know soil.
I could somehow make it. Maybe we can have some extract.
We always call it right. Fails is for first.
Just think about
Okay, we're speaking this time to start to like, right? On the campus, you can just like. I think it's scrub. What's in there?
And I also.
And
You isolated something.
They all have like notes.
Now you'd make it.
I hope that you have some percolating ideas about what you might want to do. It's a really great idea. That I was just discussing with someone about even just giving them the choice when you're doing sensitivity testing of picking which discs they want to use and perhaps which organisms, and then comparing and seeing. So it doesn't have to be this huge big revamp. However, if you are interested in Tiny Earth, we are hoping to start instructor training in Canada to make it more accessible. So next year in Carleton, we're thinking about doing this. If it's something that you might be interested in, or you just want to learn a little bit more about Tiny Earth, the QR code is there. It should take you to a Google form. Hopefully it works. And give us your email and we'll reach out to you to see if this is something you would want to do. So it's a 1 week long training, and we're trying to get funding to make it cost nothing. Like, obviously that would be ideal, but it would have been a crazy world probably where that would happen. Yeah, so do we have anything else? I think that's pretty much it. So questions, and here's our emails. You can always come and reach out to us anytime. Thanks so much for listening. Yeah.
I had a quick question. At the start, we kind of highlighted that kind of being okay with failure and like redoing experiments and everything is something that we want to drill into new students. And I was wondering, with like the crash course for high school students, do you have a way where you can deal with failure? Failure with like failed experiments or anything?
I actually call it learning.
Yeah, learning. I'm loading it. Yeah, it's a result technically. So, but yeah, how do you deal with that when you don't have like the time scale to
So at the start of the lab, we usually make an announcement that not everybody is going to find an antibiotic producer. In fact, when we went for medical training, we were 20 people, 20 instructors, and only one found an antibiotic producer. So definitely that's the first thing that I tell them, that, you know, it's not very easy to find one. Luckily, all our students found antibiotic producers. None of them, So we have those.
Yes, Ottawa has good stories.
Yeah. So, but we usually ask some students to work in summer and have some antibiotic producers screened and stored. In case somebody doesn't, find one, they don't stop there. We ask them to repeat once or twice.
Yeah.
And because that's the reason why we want to be done with it in 4th week, so that they have enough time to actually catch up with others. They can repeat and then go back to the soil sample, get a new soil sample.
Flex time.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that they can retry things.
I'm just wondering, so you mentioned that this is structured in a second year microbiology course. I'm wondering if the students, how much exposure to things like aseptic technique or certain skills that they use in the lab, how much do they have in this context before they start in the course? Yeah,
Nothing.
nothing.
Nothing, but the way we design it is, we have the traditional, so it's a 3-hour lab. We have the traditional microbiology techniques in the first 1.5 hours. Second 1.5 hours, they're working on the tiny earth project. So they're getting more.
We do like practice,
Exactly.
a little bit of practice built
Yeah.
in. And they end up learning the exact same skills you would as a traditional lab, except they're doing an authentic and original research project and they're contributing. So one thing we didn't mention is Tiny Earth has a database. So they enter all of their stuff into the database and Tiny Earth screens it for, like the hub in Wisconsin screens it for anything that might be interesting that they can follow up on.
Does it take more resources for you, like more materials, more time, more enzymes?
Yeah, so like I said, it depends. So let's say your lab budget is just 10,000. You can stop at a certain point. So you can basically customize it to your budget. And so for instance, we have the 3-month program. When we did it for high school students, it was 10% of the lab budget. So we can still achieve the same results. It depends on how you want to design it.
And like how much choice you want to give them. So instead of doing 10 biochemical tests, you might give them only 3 to choose from or to do instead. And because you were using all the same materials we would, we managed to budget it into the same budget that we used the previous year when we didn't do it.
This is very fantastic program. Thank you. Just one question. How do you handle the bicycle then? What if they end up by accident isolating nasty stuff, nasty material from it?
That's always a possibility. So we follow the ASM guidelines. So, and all the work is done on the agar. So we never go for the liquid cultures, thereby minimizing the aerosol problem. But definitely that's an issue that we discuss quite often. And then we only after it was approved by our biohazard team, we went with it.
There are some schools, if it's available to you to use a biosafety cabinet.